So imagine moving into a new apartment with a couple, right?
Okay, yeah. Sounds like a classic sitcom setup.
Right. And it goes horribly wrong. They immediately claim the master bedroom, and then they build a literal trench across the doorway to keep you out.
Oh, wow. A literal trench.
Your literal trench. And you are just exiled to the hallway. You can't leave the apartment. You can't look away. And like every time you move, they just stare you down.
That sounds incredibly stressful. I mean, that's a nightmare scenario.
It really is. But that is the brutal, silent drama currently unfolding, not in some reality TV house, but in a hobbyist's fish tank.
Hmm.
So welcome to today's deep dive, where we are looking at an environment that, most people just assume is a piece of relaxing, kinetic living room furniture.
Yeah, I mean, we really do project this very human assumption onto aquariums, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. You fill a glass box with water, you plug in a filter, and you just expect the fish to immediately swim around in this, like, plug-and-play harmony.
Right, because we provided the space and we arranged the decorations, so we just assume nature will instantly conform to our aesthetic design. But the reality of a closed-loop ecosystem is entirely different.
It's way more intense than that.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Every cubic inch of that water is a contested zone. It's constantly being negotiated by the organisms trapped inside it.
Which is wild to think about. And we are going to explore those microscopic negotiations today for you, looking through a single, beautifully hyper-specific source.
That's such a great source, too.
It really is. We're looking at a blog post titled, let me get it right, Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 296. The Kribensis Cichlids, or pelvicachromis-pulcher, finally settling in.
That title alone gives you so much context.
Right. It was written by a dedicated hobbyist named Ang and published on July 24, 2026. And the reason this post is just so captivating is the format itself. It starts with Dear Interweb, which is this classic, unassuming greeting.
Yeah, very old school internet.
Totally. But then you see Part 296, and that number alone completely resets your expectations for what we are about to read.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, dropping into the 296th entry of a personal journal, it tells you right away that you are entering a long-running, deeply committed passion project.
Yeah, this is not a casual weekend thing.
Exactly. This isn't someone who just bought a starter tank last weekend and is asking, basic questions on a forum. Ang has spent years documenting the minute, incremental shifts of this aquatic world.
Which gives them a huge advantage, right?
Oh, absolutely. When an observer has that much history with a single environment, their ability to notice tiny behavioral anomalies is incredibly sharpened. They see things the rest of us would completely miss.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we get to the intense territorial standoffs, and we will get there, we really have to look at the baseline environment and Ang's initial struggle to just make these creatures comfortable in the first place.
Right. Setting the stage is crucial here.
So Ang notes that it took roughly 2 days for these Kribensis Cichlids to settle into the tank. 2 full days of waiting, watching, and presumably just stressing out that the fish were unhappy.
Which is a very common feeling for hobbyists. You're just staring at the glass wondering what's wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But the crucial detail here is that they didn't just eventually acclimate to the tank as it was. Like, the settling only happened after Ang made a highly specific physical intervention.
And this is where it gets really technical, in a subtle way.
Right. Ang swapped out the original artificial cave for a simple terracotta-pot.
What's fascinating here is the sheer sensitivity of these aquatic environments and, what we can deduce from that specific material swap.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Why a terracotta pot?
Well, Ang's post really highlights the meticulous trial and error required in advanced fish keeping. Because Ang noted an immediate behavioral shift the moment the terracotta was introduced, we could infer that the original artificial cave it lacked some fundamental sensory feedback that the fish required to feel safe.
It totally reminds me of rearranging the furniture in a guest room over and over again just to make a finicky house guest feel at home.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right, like you swap the pillows, you move the lamp, and they still complain about a draft. But then you bring in one specific heavy wool blanket, and suddenly they sleep through the night.
Exactly. It's about finding that one precise trigger.
So do we think it was the rougher texture of the terracotta, or maybe the rounded shape of the pot, or simply the fact that it was something, different that finally broke that 2-day standoff?
I'd say based on the biology of cichlids and their natural habitats, it is likely a combination of the tactile feedback and the geometry.
Okay, so both.
Yeah. Terracotta is baked clay, right? It's porous and earthy. So unlike a smooth manufactured resin or plastic decoration, it mimics the texture of natural riverbeds or rocky outcrops that they're used to.
It makes total sense. They want something that feels like home.
Exactly. Furthermore, a pot usually features a singular, easily defensible opening. So Ang introduced a resource that finally met the cichlids' innate biological criteria for security. The artificial cave was just an object in the water to them, the terracotta pot. That was recognized as a potential fortress.
Wow, a fortress. And providing that terracotta fortress was really just the first domino, because once the environment suited them, the fish went from passive to highly active.
Very active.
Yeah. Ang notes the precise moment it became clear they were settling in, they began physically digging through the substrate.
Which is a huge indicator of comfort.
Right. They were actually picking up the gravel or sand at the bottom of the tank and moving it to the opening of the terracotta pot to create a physical barrier, like a little wall.
It's amazing to watch them do that.
And Ang observes that this was most likely the dominant fish in the tank doing the digging, specifically the male, who happens to be the largest resident.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, moving substrate is a profound behavioral shift for an animal in a new environment.
How so? Like energetically?
Yes, exactly. When a fish uses its mouth to pick up rocks, move them, and literally construct a wall, they are expending a massive amount of caloric energy.
Right. They aren't just swimming around looking pretty anymore.
Exactly. In the wild or in a tank, animals do not burn calories on that scale unless there is a critical survival imperative. This isn't casual nesting or like exploring the space. This is a definitive, high-stakes, territorial declaration of ownership.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The fish didn't just passively accept the new terracotta pot as a gift from Ang.
No, not at all.
It immediately started doing heavy construction work. It's the aquatic equivalent of a human closing on a house, getting the keys, and the very first thing they do is go out to the front yard and sink posts to put up a 6-foot wooden picket fence.
That's spot on.
It establishes hard property lines, like, this is mine now.
Yeah, and from a biological standpoint, that substrate barrier serves multiple overlapping purposes.
Okay, like what?
Physically, it restricts the size of the opening, making the pot easier to defend against predators or potential rivals. It makes the entrance smaller.
Oh, right. Less space to guard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But psychologically, it acts as a visual broadcast to every other organism in that tank. The dominant male is signaling that he has claimed the premium real estate, he possesses the physical strength to modify it, and he is now fully in charge of that specific zone.
Which is a massive escalation from just 2 days prior when they wouldn't even go near the artificial cave.
Right. They went from completely avoidant to fiercely territorial.
And the terracotta pot unlocked this aggressive level of confidence. But having this dominant male hoard the new fortress and build his picket fence, it naturally makes me incredibly anxious for whatever else is living in that tank.
Oh, you definitely should be.
Because Ang mentioned other fish, right?
Yes, and an ecosystem is defined just as much by the margins as it is by the victor. Ang's observation of those margins really reveals the unseen dynamics of the tank.
Yeah, Ang notices the female fish are hiding at the far side of the coral substrate. And honestly, this is perhaps my favorite detail in the entire post, because Ang casually admits to not remembering exactly how many fish are actually in the tank.
Which is just so relatable for anyone with a heavily planted setup.
Totally. Ang guesses there might be 1 male and 2 females, and based on that assumed head count, Ang hypothesizes that a pair may have bonded like the dominant male and one of the females taking over the terracotta pot together.
A classic pairing.
Right, but that leaves the other female totally isolated, hiding out in the coral substrate.
Ang's candidness about forgetting the fish count speaks volumes about the reality of keeping a complex, heavily decorated planted tank.
Yeah, it's not like looking at a goldfish in a bowl.
Exactly. A well-designed aquarium is not a bare glass box where everything is visible at a glance. If a fish wants to hide, it can truly disappear into the hardscape or the flora.
Just vanish entirely.
Right. But this raises an important question about the inferred social dynamics playing out right in front of Ang.
Yeah.
We are looking at a potential aquatic love triangle, where a bonded pair monopolizes the newly introduced, highly desirable cave, effectively exiling the third wheel to the coral outskirts.
I mean, being the third wheel on a date is uncomfortable enough. But imagine being the third wheel when the couple just bought a house together.
Yeah, that's rough.
Right. They are sitting inside their new terracotta pot, looking out the window, while you are relegated to standing out on the sidewalk, which in this case is the rough coral substrate.
Just shivering out in the cold, basically.
Exactly. So what is the daily reality for that isolated female? Like, is the coral substrate providing any real cover for her, or is she just living in a state of constant distress?
In the context of cichlid behavior within a closed loop,
Yeah.
She is almost certainly experiencing immense physiological stress.
Wow, really?
Yes. In the wild, an exiled or outcompeted fish has the luxury of space. They can literally just swim downstream, put physical distance between themselves and the aggressive pair, and go find a new territory.
But in a tank.
In a glass box, they are bound by the dimensions of the tank. They cannot escape the chemical signals released by the dominant male, nor can they fully escape his visual line of sight.
Oh, man. They are perpetually trapped in the same room as the hostile homeowners.
Exactly. It's psychological warfare.
Ah.
And the coral substrate might offer some superficial camouflage, allowing her to, blend in with the background, but it doesn't offer the enclosed physical security of a cave with a defensible opening.
Right. She's still exposed.
Completely. And the dominant male's territory likely extends well beyond the physical lip of the terracotta-pot. He is guarding an invisible radius around that structure.
Like a perimeter.
Exactly. So by hiding at the very side of the tank, the isolated female is attempting to stay out of that aggressive radius. She's making herself as small and unnoticeable as possible to avoid being chased or attacked.
That is it's wild to think about. Beneath the surface of this supposedly relaxing hobby, there is an intense, silent tension dictating every single movement.
The stakes are incredibly high for them.
Yeah, you have the victors secure in their modified fortress, and the outcast clinging to the edges just to survive. But observing this aquatic love triangle unfold leads directly to Aang's next step.
Right, because observation isn't enough.
Exactly. Aang doesn't just document the social exclusion. Aang actually initiates a physical intervention to try and engineer harmony back into the tank.
And intervening is really the core responsibility of the aquarist. You are the architect of that enclosed world. When the behavioral balance tips into distress, you have to adjust the resources to level the playing field.
So Aang's thought process is laid out really clearly. First, there's this contemplation of adding another artificial cave, specifically placing it at the front of the tank, just to provide some shelter for this exiled female.
Which is a logical first thought.
Right. But the final takeaway, the immediate next action step Aang actually commits to at the end of the post, is to skip the artificial cave entirely and simply acquire more terracotta pots of a similar size.
Deciding to introduce identical resources, and specifically noting they need to be of a similar size, is a highly strategic problem-solving approach.
Why does the size matter so much?
Well, Aang is attempting to artificially reduce competition without triggering another territorial dispute. If Aang were to introduce a smaller, inferior pot, the isolated female might accept it out of desperation, but the dominant male would still recognize his territory as superior. He'd maintain the current power dynamic.
Okay, that makes sense. And if Aang introduced a much larger, nicer pot?
Oh, the dominant male would likely just abandon his current home, claim the new, larger pot, build a new substrate barrier, and the whole cycle of displacement would start all over again.
He'd just upgrade his real estate and kick her out again.
Exactly. He'd just take the better house. By providing equitable, identically sized shelter, Aang hopes to give the exiled female a secure home that the dominant male views as redundant, thereby preserving his ego and his established territory.
It's so funny. It's exactly like giving two toddlers the exact same color cup so they stop fighting over who gets the blue one.
That is a perfect analogy. You have to give them the exact same thing or there will be a meltdown.
Exactly. Now, I want to look at Aang's proposed placement for this new intervention. Aang mentions putting the new cave specifically at the front of the tank.
Right. The front placement is very deliberate.
Why the front, though? Is that a strategic move to keep the new pot as far away from the dominant male's territory as possible, like breaking up the real estate? Or is it purely so Aang can keep a better eye on the hiding female?
It actually functions as a dual-purpose strategy, which is really the hallmark of a seasoned hobbyist.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, biologically, putting the new cave at the front, assuming the original pot is situated further back or off to one side, maximizes the physical distance between the two potential territories.
So it creates a buffer zone.
Exactly.
Right.
It disrupts the direct line of sight. If the dominant male cannot easily see the opening of the new pot from his front door, he is significantly less likely to feel the impulse to swim across the tank and defend against it.
Because he doesn't feel threatened by it.
Right. You're trying to establish two distinct, non-overlapping kingdoms within a severely limited footprint.
Basically out of sight, out of mind for the dominant male.
Exactly. Concurrently, placing it at the front prioritizes human visibility. The exiled female is the most vulnerable variable in this ecosystem right now.
Right. Aang needs to watch her.
Yes. Aang needs to closely monitor her health, her stress coloration, and, whether or not she actually accepts the new shelter or just remains frozen in the coral substrate. Putting the new pot at the front of the glass essentially turns that zone into a highly visible observation ward.
That is brilliant. What started as a seemingly mundane journal entry like Part 296 unpacks into this incredible sequence of environmental and social engineering.
It really is a deep look into ecosystem management.
It is. Looking back at the journey of this single post, we started with Ang exercising immense patience, right? Waiting 2 full days and just observing the initial distress before making the crucial micro-adjustment of swapping an artificial cave for a terracotta pot.
And that simple material change immediately bridged the gap between an artificial environment and a natural biological requirement.
Which triggered the fish to not just settle, but to aggressively claim the space, culminating in the dominant male digging a trench and building a physical substrate barrier right at his front door.
Fascinating chain of events.
And then, that action inadvertently revealed the hidden social dynamics of the tank.
Yeah.
This bonded pair monopolizing the resources, which exiled a forgotten third female to the dangerous, open margins of the coral substrate.
The unseen consequences of giving them what they want.
Right. And finally, we arrive at Ang's elegant solution to the crisis, which is planning to introduce identically sized terracotta pots, strategically placed to break up sightlines and restore the peace.
It truly serves as a masterclass in the quiet mechanics of ecosystem management. It proves that empathy and observation are inextricably linked.
Yeah, Ang didn't just see a problem, Ang really understood it.
Right. Ang didn't just see a fish hovering in the corner. Ang recognized the complex social exclusion causing that behavior and mapped out a structural solution.
So for anyone listening to this deep dive, I think this challenges our baseline assumptions about what it means to be well-informed.
I completely agree.
Like, we often assume that gaining deep knowledge requires reading massive textbooks or, understanding giant global systems. But Ang's journal proves that profound understanding can come from simply stopping, sitting still, and closely observing the smallest, most contained spaces.
There is an entire world in a glass box if you know how to look at it.
Exactly. Watching how a single organism interacts with its immediate environment, how it manipulates a few pebbles, it can teach you volumes about resource scarcity, territorial instincts, and social dynamics. You just have to be willing to look past the glass.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We spent all this time analyzing a fish, modifying its environment to feel secure. Think about the invisible substrate barriers we build in our own human spaces when we finally feel like we are settling in.
Oh, the ways we demarcate our own territories.
Exactly. When you get a new desk at an office, what's the very first thing you do? You don't just sit down and start typing.
No, you definitely unpack your stuff.
Right. You set up your framed photos, you angle your monitor to block the glare from the hallway, maybe you drape a sweater over the back of your chair just to signal that this chair is taken.
It's totally true.
Or when you move into a new apartment, you aggressively adjust the throw pillows on your couch to make the room feel just right. How much of our own daily human behavior, the way we arrange our furniture, the way we claim our favorite side of the table at a restaurant, the way we establish our personal boundaries, is just a slightly more complex, heavily accessorized version of a cichlid digging a trench at the opening of its favorite terracotta pot.
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah.
We really are driven by the same basic instincts.
We really are. So, next time you find yourself nudging a lamp 2 inches to the left so the room feels safe, ask yourself, are you really that different from the Kribensis cichlid? Keep observing the tiny ecosystems in your own life.